Hello and welcome to this video about grid work. I'm so excited for this video, and I know I say that about every video I do pretty much. But yeah, I'm really excited to go into this one. So basically we're going to be talking a lot about grid work. What is it? What does it look like? And also I'm going to be talking a lot about codes. I'm going to be talking a lot about akashic records, and my intention for this video is really that it's clear, that it's concise, and that it's also very activating, because the information coming through is that a lot of people who are grid workers are being activated in deeper ways at this time. And so this information is important for people to be able to kind of understand what it is that they're doing on a deeper level. So I'm going to just cover just a little bit briefly about akashic records. And there's a lot of misinformation about the akashic records. Everybody can access them. We're actually always in our akashic records, and what they are is a library of information which can be accessed. Often we begin to access it consciously through meditation, and that's because it is just above our normal range of perception. It exists in the fourth dimension, and so we're always in it. You know, we're always in all of these dimensional planes of ourselves. We often just aren't fully conscious of it. And what they contain is data, and it's not just everything. You won't just find everything in the akashic records. What you will find is things that are important to you. So that could be things from past lives, things which have been important, things which have been significant in some way. And what's important to remember is that we're also always creating new akashic records as well. So you can clear a lot of them out, but it's really important to keep in mind that we're also continually creating new ones as well. And that's why being mindful of our thoughts, being mindful of our emotions and our reactions to things is really important, because if there's something significant to you, if you don't address it and kind of clear it, you're going to start forming new records around that. And you know, you can also store like really great positive information, soul gifts and things like that in akashic records as well. So it's not necessarily a negative, but it can be. And the akashic records that we hold, which impact us and which keep us on a spiral or a cycle, or kind of like we can't get ahead, those would be considered more negative in that sense. So moving on to grid work. And actually, just before I move on, just want to say as well, all of the akashic records are around Earth. Okay, so galactic records of galactic lives are not stored in the Akash. They are stored in the halls of Amenti, which is actually on the 8th dimension. And akashic records are stored in the 4th. And so that's why people, you know, they're like, why can't I see my galactic lives? Why can't I feel my galactic guides? And I'm like, because your Akash is really heavy, you know, and so you can't receive that higher dimensional information. Or if you can't, it might be coming through, but it's kind of just bouncing off your 4D, because your 4D is really heavy with stuff that probably actually isn't even yours. And so it's kind of important to bear this in mind as we're moving on in the video, that your ability to receive higher dimensional information is in direct relation to how you are dealing with life on Earth right now. Are you working on yourself? Are you working on your stuff? Or are you putting everything on the back burner? Are you hiding things from yourself? Are you ignoring things? So yeah, so moving on to grid work. Now, again, the kind of message that was coming through was that if you are feeling called to this video, you are very, very likely a grid worker. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel called to this information. And when my guide said that, I was like, that's kind of sounds a little bit cliche. Like, if you're here, it's because you're meant to be here. But at the same time, there is absolutely very strong levels of truth to that. If you're not a grid worker, you're probably not going to want to watch this video because it doesn't have the information that your soul is seeking, essentially. And so being a grid worker, you have likely been doing this your whole life without realizing it. And at the most basic level, what grid workers are transmuters of negative energy. So if I'm looking at someone's field and I'm reading their soul, essentially, their field, their data that exists within them, I'll see a sort of network that almost looks like large white discs that are constantly kind of spinning, like transmuting energy, essentially. And so wherever they go, they'll probably be just picking up stuff, clearing it, transmuting it. Now that's likely someone who is potentially quite activated in their grid work already, or I might perceive that as like a template that is ready to be activated or is in the process of being activated. And that might actually also kind of close down a little bit when somebody's going through something really heavy, or when they're kind of dealing with their own stuff. That template within them might not be as at the forefront. It might not be as active. And along with these sort of the ability to transmute a lot of negative energy, what grid workers do is channel codes. And these will be related to various different incarnations that they've had. And these codes will look like sacred geometries, mostly, or some kind of light language, light codes. If you have seen pictures of them, that's what it kind of looks like. Different colors, different frequencies, and they'll have different sounds to them. So this is when we're looking really deep into the aura. We can see these things. And I thought a kind of good example is the pentagram in terms of a code. And it kind of links into this sort of akashic records thing as well, when we're sort of understanding that on a deeper level, because when you look at the pentagrams, they have a record of how they've been used on earth. So some people will look at a pentagram and be like, oh my God, the devil, Satan, oh my God. There'll be fear associated with that. Some people will look at a pentagram and go, Wicca. Some people will look at a pentagram and go, ceremonial magic. So there's many different ways in which we can perceive these specific codes. However, if you are a grid worker and you're bringing through, you're going to be bringing through the sort of highest possible form of those codes through your vessel and anchoring them into the grid of the earth. And the grid, again, when we perceive this clairvoyantly, it literally looks like a grid. It looks like this massive kind of grid around the earth. And it links in through all of the different crystals, all of the different forms on earth which hold all of this data about the earth, which hold the earth's akashic records. And so when we're anchoring in codes, what we're doing is we're clearing and we're collapsing certain things within the earth's akash, which are no longer beneficial, which are no longer supportive to the transformation that the earth is going through right now. And so these codes can look like things like hexagrams, rainbows. All of these things contain amazing swaths of data which are useful in some way. And so you could be channeling codes from Egypt, from Atlantis, from Lemuria, from different galactic civilizations and star systems as well. And these are all just things which are going to be supportive in terms of up-leveling, upgrading the earth. And it's important to note as well that when you first start doing grid work, you're likely not going to know exactly what you're doing, and when I'm channeling, I'm not going, okay, we're going to choose a rainbow code, we're going to choose a pentagram code. It's not like that. It's channeled and it's done at a much, much higher frequency than the mind. So you're not going to be thinking kind of chronologically about what it is that you're doing. You're just going to be in channeling flow. And again, that's when you're kind of at a more deeper end of the spectrum in terms of the grid work that you're doing, this is just kind of me explaining what it can look like. So generally, when you have done a certain amount of healing, when you have opened up, when you have purified your vessel, that is when you're going to start really, really deeply perceiving more accurately what it is that you're actually doing. And you'll often see like children as well will be doing grid work, and they might not be fully consciously aware of what they're doing. Some of them might be. And that's because they have very pure vessels. They tend to not be as, their akashics are not as heavy with trauma because they just haven't lived as long, you know? And so, especially a lot of the children that are coming in now, who are coming in through parents who have maybe done quite a lot of work on themselves, and so their ancestral lines are not as heavy, and so it's just much easier for them to kind of just step into their mission in a really quick way. And so it's important to remember, you know, about this sort of grid work kind of activating within you at a certain point in your healing journey, because somebody who is really deep in their density, is really deep in their trauma, it wouldn't be very ethical to send them loads of stuff to clear on a collective level. It's just not really fair. You know, and our guides do have codes of conduct with us, which is often why if your akashics are super heavy, not only can you not perceive your galactic guides, you can't perceive them anyway. But it would also be really unethical of them just to kind of appear in your field and be like, hey, I'm here, you know, when you haven't done all of that work on yourself to be able to hold that frequency. It would be considered completely unethical, and you're just very unlikely to find any galactic guides that would actually do that unless they're kind of working for some sort of dark agenda. They have protocols of conduct and contact, which they have to uphold. And so your guides aren't going to collaborate with you on like a big grid work project if your akashics are super heavy and you have all this density in your field, because also you're not going to be able to truly anchor these codes and be a clear channel and be a clear vessel. And what's another thing that is important to be aware of is being able to like read what is yours and what isn't. And you know, when I'm working with people, that's kind of one of the first things, if they're not doing that already, that I'll suggest to them is sort of like, are you practicing discernment? Are you practicing sovereignty in terms of understanding what belongs to you and what doesn't? Because you can have people trying to clear stuff and they can't clear it because it's not even theirs to clear, and what they need to do is kind of return it to the person that they picked it up from. And so you're not going to be sent kind of big collective things to clear if you're not in that space of sovereignty of where you know that the thoughts that you're thinking are your own, or the emotions that you're experiencing are your own. Is that an ancestral pattern? Is that something I've picked up off someone in the street? Is that something I've picked up off a friend I was having a conversation with and I've been empathizing with them, and then I've absorbed some of their stuff? You know, because yes, it can be great to be to transmute and clear, but if you're not in the space where you're doing that, you're just going to suck in and absorb everybody else's stuff, and that's not useful for you or for them. And so that's probably the key thing on this healing journey, and at this point in time, discernment is where it's at. You know, practicing discernment, practicing that every single day, and I can assure you it is going to get a lot I don't want to say tougher, but a lot more necessary for us to be able to practice that discernment, especially as people are opening up spiritually so much more now, that discernment piece is going to come in more and more over the next X amount of years. And so during this kind of journey of being a grid worker, there is usually an initiation when it comes to clearing on a collective level. There is a point of gnosis that is reached, which is sort of like, okay, what I'm clearing is actually on a collective level now. And, you know, kind of prior to that, you may just be clearing areas as you kind of go into them, that sort of thing, which is still obviously really important work. You know, I've seen people who have driving jobs who are grid workers, who drive from maybe one side of the country to the other, or, you know, halfway across or whatever, and their soul has called them into that job because they're spreading codes along certain lines of the earth, along certain parts of the grid. And so once you become more kind of activated into the awareness of what you're doing, the work gets deeper. Once your clairs get sharper, that's when you start really being able to attune to, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing it. So moving on to like, why is grid work important? So what you'll notice as you kind of get deeper into this work as well is that we activate all of these codes and all of these templates within one another. You're going to be activated by templates that I've activated by watching this video, and, you know, vice versa with other grid workers. There's always this kind of exchange of information that is happening, and it's, you know, so we can ask that question of like, why are we doing this? And it's because exchanging data for the purpose of expansion is at the root of natural law, is at the root of the universal energies and how they work. And that is true here, that is true on all planes, all dimensions, all spaces, all realities. that is how we grow. That's like the impulse of growth. And so on Earth, why this is so important is because we're moving into this new golden age. And although it may not seem like that right now, to some people, that is exactly what is happening. We are seeing the destruction and the falling of what we maybe held once to be true, and that's so that we can anchor in this whole new timeline, this whole new age. And the message coming through right now, they're like, say that it is accessible to you now. It is accessible to you now. These golden age frequencies are very much available now. And so it's our role as grid workers to support Gaia through this massive shift, to support humanity and ourselves on this journey. And so you might find that a lot of the codes that you are anchoring are from other golden ages, like Atlantis, like Lemuria, which obviously had their fall, but they also had golden age coding. And so that's important because we can take those codes and go, that worked, let's anchor this in. And so there are many wisdom keepers from these times, such as the Fae, such as the inner earth beings of Telos. And I have an amazing Telos story that I will share at some point as well. Telos being the inner earth around Mount Shasta. And so these beings have been these wisdom keepers of these codes during this time when humanity has fallen into a real dark age. And so we're often receiving a lot of these codes from these beings, exchanging them, anchoring them into the grid. And so I'm going to get into, what does grid work look like? What is the kind of story or the arc of a grid worker from kind of being unsure of what you're doing, but why it's still important to do it, into becoming more aware, more masterful of the energies that you are working with. And so I'm going to kind of explain that through my own journey with grid work. And one thing I just wanted to touch on as well is, you know, something that's so important, and I have spoken about this before as well, is not littering. Picking up litter is such an important act of being a grid worker, because energy is everything. Everything is quantum. And so when somebody drops litter, and this is one of the things I would start to feel when I had sort of 2021, I started to really become activated into consciously doing grid work. And so I would feel like I would get really triggered when I would see litter, and like, you know, more so than kind of ever before, like it would really upset me. And what I started feeling was that there was this like distortion field around where litter was dropped, even like a small amount, but especially when there's large amounts of rubbish dumped, because what it is, the energy behind that is a lack of care for the earth, a lack of care for your fellow human who has to then walk by that, who, you know, it's so much deeper than just that piece of rubbish on the ground. And so, you know, and the elemental beings, they love it when you clear up litter. They will be your friends forever if you pick up litter, because it affects them. You know, it affects how they're able to kind of move, how they're able to receive energies from the earth. It affects us all. And so just being aware of that, you know, and where you can, endeavoring to kind of pick up stuff that's lying there, it can be a really supportive practice for the earth, because the energies that it is kind of imposing onto the field is one of, we don't care about this planet, essentially. So what can grid work look like? So when so around 2021, I felt a really strong call to go to Glastonbury. I live in Scotland, so Glastonbury isn't too far. But I knew I was doing something there, but I didn't know what it was. And I would feel like, okay, I need to go to this place. I need to go to this place. And I could sort of feel light coming through me, but I wasn't able to read specifically what those codes were or what was actually happening. But I kept doing it anyway. I would be called to speak light language. So light language is a really important part of grid work. If you are called to a certain place and you feel that those codes coming through you, through your voice, you feel called to sing, do it, because there's a reason why, and you will be like harmonizing the field with the sound that you're emitting. And so I was being called to do a lot of light language, that sort of stuff, but I wasn't at that point where I was like super attuned to what I was doing. But that does not make the work any less important. It's still incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. And so fast forward to later in 2021, I went to Mexico, and traveling expands you in such incredible ways, because you are picking up all of these codes from the land and sharing your codes with the land as well. So it's just such an activating experience. And I went to Mexico, and I was walking through the street, and I started feeling and seeing all of these codes, and I could see them so clearly just coming through me, anchoring down through my energy centers and going into the earth, and I could see the grid, and it was just all of these codes were merging with the grid. And I was like, oh my God. And I spoke to one of my friends who's also, you know, practicing psychic, and I was like, I feel like something's, you know, really, really activating within me right now. And so shortly after that, I felt a really strong call to leave Mexico and go to Guatemala. And I had the wildest, most amazing activation there. So I was on a bus, and it was interesting actually, when I would travel around Mexico on the buses, you know, these long bus rides, 12-hour bus rides, I would have these like really activating experiences, you know, even with sort of galactic beings coming into my field when I'd be on the bus and communicating with me clairvoyantly. And, you know, it was just that experience of travel was just shaping me and activating me in just such profound ways. And a lot of emotional releases on the buses I would have as well, a lot of tears as well. And so when I was getting the bus to Guatemala, can't remember how long the bus ride was, but it was really long, 12 to 18 hours, maybe something like that. And I had been fasting as well, so I was very, very heightened. And I just started perceiving clairvoyantly this scene. That's what it looked like to me. So I'm sitting on this little minibus, and it's almost like I'm looking out the window, but receiving clairvoyantly this scene of, it looked like titans, like these big, massive beings. And they just had all this dark, dense energy around them. And I could see all of these beings of light battling with these titans. And I was sort of like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, what am I meant to do here? Like, why am I seeing this? And I sort of tried to kind of distract myself, but the vision would not go away. Also, I'm sitting on this bus with all of these people. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Like, I just have to like join in this battle. Like, there's nothing else I can do. And so, but it was like, as soon as I consented, as soon as I committed to that, I, you know, within the vision became one of these beings of light, which was obviously an aspect of me anyway, and started joining in this battle. And we sort of restrained the titans. We opened portals to send them back to where they'd come from, to return them to the light. And then we started clearing up all of the energy that they'd left behind, all of the densities that were around the earth, where they had been, and the sort of energetic carnage that they had left behind. We started clearing all of that up. And it was so amazing and so profound. And what I'm trying to sort of convey with this story as well is, like, you already know how to do it. You're human, just hasn't remembered yet. And trusting that when you are meant to go through that initiation of remembrance, of knowing exactly what you're doing, it will just happen. So just keep trusting in the process, because there are aspects of you which are already doing all of this stuff. You're maybe just not super attuned to it happening. And the more you remember your multidimensional consciousness, the more you will become aware and heightened of exactly what you are doing when you are working with the Earth's grid, when you are working with the Earth on that more psychic, energetic level. And so another activation or sort of remembrance that I went through, I was working with a client, and we were looking into this past life she had. She was Scottish. She was had a lot of past lives in Scotland, and we were looking at all of this this sort of pain that had happened to the land. I think it was something to do with like a genocide or a massacre that had happened, and I could just see all of these other people that was tied to this akashic that the land was holding, and it was anchored through all of these people. And what I could tell was that the souls of all of these people, I don't know how many, 50 people, I don't know, maybe more than that. And they were saying they were all ready to collapse this akashic, to release it. The earth was like, yes, I'm ready to release this. And so we worked through just this one person to release this whole akashic that was attached to all of these people. And so healers, you know, when you're doing your kind of energy work and things, you might be called to collapse akashics of the land through other people, because so often the earth and people, you can imagine, are anchored together in some way, in terms of memory, in terms of cellular memory, in terms of the way that the land and the people are holding these memories together and are ready to just be collapsed, or ready to be folded in on itself. Timelines are ready to be collapsed and folded in on themselves. And another story I have as well, which it was also in Guatemala, which is just a super activating place. For me anyway, it was. And also Guatemala has a really, really, like so many places on earth, a very, very sad history of really deep oppression and civil war. And I could, you know, being a person who's very, very sensitive to energies, I could feel that palpably when I was there. And I could only spend a certain amount of time there because I had to leave. Well, I was being called elsewhere as well, but I couldn't have seen myself staying there for a very long period of time. And so, yeah, so I was called to do a lot of grid work while I was there. Obviously received that sort of initiation, activation when I was entering Guatemala on the bus. And I went to Lake Atitlan, and I could tell there was something very, very strange about the energies in one of the particular towns, San Marco, if anybody has been there. And this is the kind of like hippie town, and there's a lot of plant medicine ceremonies. There's a lot of stuff going on there, yoga, just loads of stuff going on there, spiritual stuff. But whenever I would go there, so I wasn't staying in that part of Lake Atitlan, I was staying in one of the other little towns. But whenever I would go to San Marcos, weird things would happen to me, like people would be really, really rude to me, or I would have all these experiences that made me feel really uncomfortable. I was speaking to one of my friends who, you know, is a psychic as well, and I said to her, like, I think something's kind of going on with this town. I feel like I'm meant to do some kind of clearing here, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. And she was like, okay, let's get together. So we got together on Zoom, her and a couple of other psychics that we knew as well, who were feeling called to investigate this further. And what we discovered was that there was a very, very large portal that had been opened there in the lake with by somebody who was actually very well known. And we were able to find exactly who this person was. And so, you know, that's sort of an example of something that you might be called to do, is sort of closing down certain portals. And so we had to work, and we had to do a lot of work to close down this portal. We were all absolutely exhausted afterwards because it was such an immense piece of grid work, of healing that needed to take place with the land. And so we had to, there was so much that we had to clear, entities that we had to release from bindings, and you name it, there was a lot going on. So that would be, again, an example of like something more advanced that you maybe won't be called to in the very beginning of your grid work journey, because it's, you know, it's a lot of work. But something that can potentially be kind of sent to you to, you know, from your guides being like, look, we need someone to heal this, we need somebody to work on transmuting this. Is this, you know, something you're willing to do? And evidently I was like, okay, yeah. So that would be another example. And it's funny because as well, on this kind of journey that I had, I started in Mexico. I went down Central America to Costa Rica. I was in Costa Rica for quite a while, and then I ended up going back to Mexico, and I went to Tulum. And it was funny being in Tulum coming in the November, I believe it was, to then returning like the following year in the September. And it was like the land had been ravaged. That's the only way I could describe it, because so many people were going there and they were just taking from the land, because there's a huge vortex in Tulum. It's similar to Bali, it's similar to Egypt. Huge energy vortexes there which emit these amazing healing codes. You know, it kind of brings everything up to the surface, and you know, you can feel it when you're there. But it felt like so many people had been going there and receiving from the land, but they're not at a place in their lives where they understand that reciprocal energy that we have with nature, that reciprocal energy that we have with the earth, and respecting her. And when she gives us something, that we give back, because that, you know, and it's not like, oh, we just give to receive, or we receive to get. It's just reciprocal. It's like a circle, you know. And obviously a lot of people were going and just simply receiving and not making any offerings to the earth, or maybe not understanding how to truly show gratitude to the earth in that way. And so when I went back to Tulum, I was there for 2 weeks, and I could do nothing, because I was just being flooded with codes from so many beings that were just like, right, we need to replenish. And I literally laid in bed for about 2 weeks, because like, I would go out and I would get fruit and I would come back, and that was pretty much it, because there was just so much being pushed through me at that time. And I feel like it was in preparation, because September's still low season there. I think high season is sort of November to March or something like that. And so there, you know, it was sort of like, okay, we need to kind of reestablish the Earth's grid a little bit here. We need to fill the vortexes with, you know, replenish them. That was what I kept hearing at that time, was like replenishment, and really offering the Earth that support, you know, because it's a lot. The Earth is a being, the Earth is alive, and we can't just take from her and not expect her to become depleted. It's just like anything. And so if you are going to these places, if you do feel, because they're amazing, go to, I'm not saying don't go to these places, but when you go with the intention to give back. And it's almost like when you do, what you receive is so much greater as well, because the Earth recognizes this reciprocal nature. And it's so true. It's like what you put in is what comes back to you, because that's like it's universal law, you know. So just going, you know, you can go there, but just have that intention that you're going to like give as much as you're going to receive. And so another example of grid work as well is people who are attuned to mediumship as well. We can all become attuned to mediumship. I will do a video on that as well. And you know, we can be called to cross over souls who have become trapped in certain places, who are trapped in the, you know, if you go somewhere where it's really haunted and you can kind of feel, you know, when I go into a haunted place, I feel like, whoa, like I really, you know, the energies are strong, and everybody will probably feel it in some way, but feel it differently, whether they, you know, you realize you're feeling it or not. But often if you're a grid worker and you're called there, you might be called to cross over large amounts of souls who have become trapped because maybe there's been a genocide or a massacre, or there's some kind of like atrocity, or something within a community has happened. I mean, it's endless, the things that, you know, can occur. It could be maybe a bout of illness has spread amongst a community and lots of people have been dying, and it's created this really this sort of negative energy there, and souls have become trapped and they're trying to cross over. So it can be things like that as well. Grid work can look like so many different things. And so I also just want to touch on, you know, if you feel a call to visit a certain country, go. Make that leap. You're being called there for a reason. It has codes for you. You have codes for it. We have such amazing experiences when we travel, and so I think it's just really important to honor that. You know, when we feel a call to go somewhere, then, you know, if it feels like the right time, then definitely do it. So I think that's everything from my notes. I just really want to just kind of close with, like, doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing. Doesn't matter. It will all unlock, you know, as I hope you can kind of see from my story. It's like it all unfolds, it all unlocks. Keep doing your light language. Keep just, you know, when you feel something coming through, just imagining it grounding into the grid of the earth. You know, do your Reiki. You can do Reiki on the earth, you know, all different things like that. Even just a little visualization where you imagine the earth just being encased in white light or gold light or pink light. All of these things are supportive for you and are supportive for the earth. So yes, I've given some examples of kind of more complex grid work, or grid work you might experience kind of later on your journey of activation. But that's just to give you some kind of examples of what that can look like. You know, it's also everything that you are doing is amazing. Everything that you are doing is grid work, is, you know, it's so important to that overall healing and transmutation of those energies that we're working through at the moment on the earth. So I hope you find this video informative. And if you have like any questions about grid work, or would like any kind of like advice, or just anything at all related to this video, please get in touch with me. You can leave me a comment, you can message me on Instagram, you can email me, whatever feels right for you. I always love to hear from everybody, and yeah, thank you so much for watching this, and take care.